We get some pretty big news surrounding a Jaren Duran trade yesterday. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Red Seat Radio. My name is Corbin, and thank you very much for clicking on this video. The Red Sox, their bats may be fully asleep at the wheel right now. They just simply can't figure out how to score runs against good teams since the All-Star break, but that doesn't change the fact that the MLB trade deadline continues to steamroll its way towards the Boston Red Sox, and one of the bigger questions surrounding this Red Sox team for a while now has been, what are they going to do with Jaren Duran, right? Are they going to trade him? Is he available? And what would a package the Red Sox would be willing to take for Jaren Duran look like, at least amongst Red Sox fans, right? I don't know about analysts or the team itself, but it's been one of the most talked about conversations amongst Red Sox fans for the past couple of months, I think at this point. However, we got some really big information yesterday regarding a Jaren Duran and really the trade deadline in general that really kind of clears up what the Red Sox view on where Jaren Duran stands may be, because yesterday, Sean McAdam of Mass Live released an article that went into sort of the latest as to what he was hearing about the Red Sox in the trade deadline. And I'm going to link the entire article in the description down below because there is some absolutely fantastic information about where the Red Sox heads are at. Things like the Red Sox are very interested in Los Angeles Dodgers catcher Dalton Rushing, who at the beginning of the season was considered the Dodgers' top prospect, kind of struggling, and not kind of, he is struggling to put it together offensively at the major league level, but defensively he's been very solid up there, and the bat potential we've seen in minor league baseball is really, really high. If they could figure out a way to tap into that, you could create one of the best catching tandems in the entire sport between Carlos Narvaez and Dalton Rushing. We also know that specifically the Dodgers have been looking at Franklin Arias and Brandon Clark when it comes to this potential deal. They actually had scouts yesterday looking at both of these guys in Greenville, so we'll see what comes of that. He also mentioned that teams aren't incredibly interested in trading off young controllable talent all that much, and that the status quo for teams that are officially in the seller's camp is that they're looking to trade veterans on expiring deals, which to me just sort of puts Merrill Kelly in the real big spotlight for the Red Sox, right? If you can get that guy, you're going to put yourself in a really good position down the stretch, but it's not really the point of this video, right? The point of this video and what I'm talking about today is the information he had about a potential Jaren Duran trade. Because in this Sean McAdam article, the one thing that I think really stood out to Red Sox fans was a proposed trade by the San Diego Padres for Jaren Duran. Apparently, the Padres had offered Dylan Cease, their number 2 prospect, and the number 21 prospect in the country, catcher Ethan Salas, as well as another unnamed prospect that isn't the Padres' number 1, Deveris, right? They didn't put him on the table for Duran, but they put another prospect, Ethan Salas, and Dylan Cease on the table for Jaren Duran. Specifically, Sean McAdam says they didn't just reject this offer, they quickly rejected this offer. And I think this is really telling of where the Red Sox are at in this Jaren Duran conversation, because this isn't an incredibly small package for Duran, is it? Cease has struggled a bit this year on the surface with a 4.59 ERA. However, the underlying metrics are still absolutely fantastic. It's a 3.57 FIP, so he's more than a run lower in his fielding independent pitching, basically meaning he was a bit unlucky in San Diego so far this season. The strikeouts and swing and miss are still really high. His expected ERA is much lower than his actual ERA. Basically, he's just sort of been unlucky in San Diego and would still have been a really good addition to the Boston Red Sox, at least rotationally coming down the stretch here, especially if you could get him out of San Diego and maybe rework some things. We would have seen how that would have gone, but either way, still a very intriguing piece for the Boston Red Sox. You add in Ethan Salas, who, again, one of the top catching prospects in the entire sport, in a position where the Red Sox simply don't have any depth in, right? Your depth is Johan Fran Garcia, hit a couple of moonshots recently, and then it's basically nobody, right? Brooks Brannon might be a conversation a little bit later down the road. Not exactly incredibly exciting. Nathan Hickey potentially, right? Ronaldo, you've got options down there, but nothing incredibly exciting. Ethan Salas could have been that incredibly exciting prospect. Now, he's been struggling mightily at the plate his last 2 seasons in professional baseball. However, he's only 19 years old. There's still a ton of time for him to figure himself out at the plate. Scouts still really love his potential, and you're talking about, again, a top 25 prospect in the entire sport. Then you add in somebody else who we don't even know who that is, right? It could have been a bullpen potential piece, right? Maybe a guy in the high minors ready to make his major league debut. It could have been a lower minors, maybe a pitcher to add to the pitching pipeline. I don't know. But if you look at that deal on paper, it's actually pretty even when it comes to the value that Duran currently has in the open market. In fact, if you plug it into baseball trade values, which again, I always say, not the Bible, just simply a good baseline as to, hey, maybe this deal's a little bit fair, maybe it's unfair. Regardless, on baseball trade values, it's a pretty dead even trade, right? It honestly comes up when you validate the trade as a dead even trade for both sides. So the Padres offered a pretty even dollar here value amount for Jaren Duran. The Red Sox not only rejected it, they quickly rejected it. And to me, that says one of two things. I know I said this could be one of two things. I actually think it could also be a combination of both of these things, but there are two big things that stand out to me when it comes to the fact that the Red Sox denied this trade. First and foremost, it doesn't appear as though the Red Sox are pretty high on Ethan Salas, because at the end of the day, that's pretty much the meat of this trade, right? It would be Duran for Ethan Salas, and then Dylan Cease would be an incredibly nice add-on to this, right? I mean, you look at Dylan Cease and you sit there, and that's one of those guys who I think we've made like 3 or 4 videos about Dylan Cease over the last 3 years I've had this channel, right? It feels like every year at the deadline, he's a potential option for the Boston Red Sox. He would be a really nice piece for this Red Sox team, but he's a rental. Right, he's a high-value rental who's on the last year of arbitration and who has Scott Boras as an agent. It would have been a very, very small chance that the Red Sox are able to bring this guy in and extend him and create sort of this controllable asset that they've really been looking for, at least been rumored to have been looking for this entire deadline season. So really it comes down to, is Ethan Salas and, 2 months of Dylan Cease worth Jaren Duran? And to the Red Sox, it doesn't appear as though that is the case. Ethan Salas, again, we talked about it, right? Great talent, but just simply hasn't been able to figure out how to translate that talent into actual results, specifically at the plate. And maybe the Red Sox were worried about that. I think a lot of people are in kind of a similar boat to me, at least based on the comments you guys have had. Maybe I'm totally off base here and a lot of you guys disagree, but if the Red Sox are looking to put Jaren Duran on the market, it feels like, to me, you don't want to waste that trade, right? You don't want that trade to just simply be to create roster space, to go after, let's say, a Merrill Kelly or a Charlie Morton or a Seth Lugo or a Dylan Cease, where they're going to be impactful for this team for maybe the last stretch of the season. But then, you're sort of sitting there and being like, okay, well, you wasted Jaren Duran's 3 years for Dylan Cease's 2 months. If you were going to trade Duran, it always felt like, to me, it was the best idea to go after a controllable young arm that can sit comfortably between Crochet and Bayo in the rotation for a few years to come, right? Not just a guy who's going to sit between those guys for the next 2 months. And it looks like the Red Sox have agreed here, because the second thing I think that this indicates is that the Red Sox, they aren't incredibly hell-bent on making sure that Duran is on another team come July 31st. And that could make a lot of sense. We always talk about what kind of role he's taken on in the clubhouse. On top of that, with Meyer now injured for an indefinite amount of time here, they kind of need Duran out in center field, right? Your options are either Don at second base or David Hamilton, because for some reason, like we talked about yesterday, you're refusing to even remotely try Vaughn Grissom at this point. I don't know if maybe that's a name that they're trying to move or whatever. Feels like they are, but at the same time, too, it's like that guy is just sitting there. You could put, say, Don Rafaela back in center field full time and just have Vaughn Grissom and Romy Gonzalez be your second basemen going forward and hopefully get something out of them. But you brought up David Hamilton, which means that Cedar Rafaela is going to be spending a pretty large portion of his time here in second base. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to be spending a majority of it, but it's going to be a whole lot more than you've seen over the last few months, which means you kind of need Duran for center field, right? You don't have another true option out there in center field. I like Wilyer Abreu. He hasn't played enough center field. He is a really good right fielder. You don't want to move him into center field. I don't think Roman Anthony can handle center field at Fenway Park. He's definitively, in my opinion, a corner outfielder, right? So you kind of need Duran with this Marcelo Meyer injury, and I think that's a large portion of the reason why the Red Sox aren't even remotely entertaining a deal like this, right? Because you need this guy in order to cover some of these spaces. And again, we've talked about this before. The Red Sox have been pretty open that they actually enjoy the fact that they have so many outfielders because of this reason, right? You can cover a whole lot of areas and not really lose a ton of production when injuries do occur. And as we know, being Red Sox fans over the last few years, injuries occur quite a bit. And Sean McAdams actually kind of backs up both of these ideas here in this article with quotes such as, the closer we get to the deadline, the less likely it is that the Sox are going to deal from their major league roster. Specifically, when it comes to Jaren Duran, quote, an affordable salaried player like Duran could be of interest to each of the other 29 teams. But for now, the small market seller clubs like Miami Miami, Pittsburgh, Kansas City, and others aren't looking to upgrade their roster for a season that's already lost. It's kind of making it sound like there aren't a ton of teams that would be a match for the Red Sox right now and what they're looking for in a Duran trade. Also adding in that it may make more sense to wait until the offseason so that it's a whole lot more teams that could be of interest in this scenario. So all in all, the answer fans have been looking for may have just been answered by Sean McAdam, right? You take a look at the fact that the Red Sox denied this trade that could legitimately have some impact on this Red Sox team immediately and in the future. You take a look at sort of what the rumblings are in terms of the viewpoint of Jaren Duran. I mean, it's not just Sean McAdam saying this. Jon Heyman's saying this. Buster Olney's saying this, right? It feels like the Red Sox are pretty hell-bent on holding on to this guy at this point in time. And again, it makes sense for various reasons. It doesn't for other reasons, and maybe we'll talk about that in another video. But then the question becomes, okay, if you're not only not willing to trade Duran or Abreu and make room for, Roman Anthony and Cedon to be in the outfield full time and use that to go and get a controllable starter and really bolster this rotation, which it also doesn't look like the opportunity is there for Duran to be traded for one of these guys. And I think that's another big part of this, right? It's not only that the Red Sox don't really feel comfortable doing it, it's that opportunity may not be there amongst a lot of teams. So the question becomes, how do the Red Sox get any deals done? To be honest with you, it's actually a very simple answer. It's the answer that every buying team is considering right now at the deadline, and it's which prospects are you willing to deal with and which prospects are you holding on to for dear life? And for the Red Sox, this is a really interesting conversation, right? Because obviously you're not trading Marcelo, Roman, or even Christian Campbell at this point in the season, despite him really struggling in AAA right now. There's still faith in the Red Sox organization that he's going to be able to turn around and be an impact bat at some point this year or specifically next year, more than likely here. So all of a sudden, the Red Sox farm system becomes really interesting, right? Because even outside of those guys, you have some very high value pieces. Guys like Peyton Tolley, Franklin Arias, Brandon Clark, Yostinson Garcia. Those are guys who are starting to pop up on top 100 prospect lists. You've got guys like Luis Paredes, Juan Valera, Justin Gonzalez, right? You have a whole bunch of interesting sort of lower level prospects as well. The conversation now becomes for Craig Breslow, kind of like it was for Dave Dombrowski back in 2016, 2017, where it was, okay, maybe you don't win the World Series this year. Maybe you don't, be the world beater that you were in 2018, but this is the time frame where you want to be competitive. You have to figure out how to deplete this farm system enough where you can get the pieces that you need, not only for this year, but years to come, while also not doing enough to totally decimate this farm system, right? And that's what makes this deadline absolutely fascinating to me, is that you're going to have to go for not just controllable pieces that you can have for the next few years, but veteran rental pieces as well, which appears to be what mostly the market is centered around right now, which it usually is during deadlines anyways. But you're going to have to figure out a way to, hey, balance that act between we're going to give up, a Yo Stinson, a Blaze Jordan, a Mikey Romero for a rental, and, a guy like Conley Early or David Sandlin or Brandon Clark for someone who could be more impactful over the long term. And I know we've talked a lot about the deadline over this last week, and I know we're going to talk about the deadline a lot over this next week, but you sit there and it's like, it's a fascinating deadline, right? Because not only is it fascinating in terms of where the Red Sox are at and what the Red Sox are currently doing against these teams and where they are in relation to a lot of other teams in the AL, but also in terms of the internal stuff, right? You're not going to deal from the major league roster, so how do you make it work with a farm system that wasn't as strong as it was a year ago, but is stronger in different areas, specifically with that pitching? Are you willing to move on from some of this pitching depth that you've developed over the last year in order to get something that's going to help this team in the short term? It's going to be an incredibly fascinating deadline for me, but at the end of the day, regardless of where the Red Sox go and regardless of how the Red Sox get there, it does not look like Jaren Duran is going to be involved. And I think that's really great news for some people. I think it's interesting news for others. And then I think there's a third category here that really wanted him moved, and they're going to be a little bit disappointed. So let me know in the comment section down below, what do you guys think about this? What did you think about the rejected deal? Would you have taken it if you were the Red Sox? And what do you think about the Red Sox stance on not only Duran, but the deadline in general? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments. As always, if you made it to the end of this video, do me a favor, make sure you guys have hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you're new here, we talk Red Sox content almost every single day. Also, make sure you guys have hit the like button on this video as well. It just simply helps out a ton, and it's the best way to let me know you're enjoying the content. Don't forget, if you guys want to listen instead of watch, all you got to do is head over to your favorite podcasting app and look up Red Seat Radio. Thank you all very much for clicking on this one, and I will see you in the Red Seats.